Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep, so before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. My first memory is of a dead man. I'm 4. Rolls of morning fog swirl around me. I look up and there he is, strung by a dozen silver ropes between pine trees like a caught fly, dripping with blood. His expression is one of shock and horror, but mainly of death. Years later, when the memory surfaces without any reason, I ask my grandmother about it. Sometimes the forest gives, she says with a shrug, and sometimes it eats. At the time, I think she means how we often conjure up terrible fantasies deep in the woods, that my memory is really a I now know that isn't what she meant at all. Asterisk, I live in a cabin in the heart of the forest, the deep woods. That's what Gran has always called it, at least. I'm old enough now that I suspect there's another name for the place we live, but she's never offered it up. At this point, I don't care much. It's always been just the two of us, as far back as I can remember. No cousins or friends that come for a visit. Not my parents or even the memory of them. I might have thought Gran kidnapped me as a baby and is hiding me in the middle of nowhere if it weren't for our shared crooked noses, skewed at exactly the same angles, and the way we both sneeze in the strong sunlight. And besides, if I was some kidnapped child, escaping wouldn't be an issue. I'm in town twice a week for classes with the other local children, usually just Hollis and Jackson, but Nara too when her father lets her. We have a computer with internet in our reading nook, and I'm given free rein to roam the deep woods whenever I please. As long as I follow the superstitions, that's what I call them at least. Stomp at each end of a bridge 3 times. Whenever you cross one dot, leave milk on the front porch every summer and winter solstice. Crush soonberries before they can ripen to purple. Never leave a photograph in view of an open window. Always lock the door before sunset, but unlock it before sunrise. To her, these rituals are rules, unchangeable forces of nature like velocity or gravity, a way of life. To me, though a rule has always been a thing with a consequence behind it, there has to be a point. When I was young, I didn't know the difference, but isn't it the same for any child? Rain is just as normal and natural to us before we learn about the water cycle as it is after. Things simply are. It's only when we can finally reach the top shelf that we start to question. Slowly, as I grew, the two categories began to separate: rules and superstitions. Asterisk, keep away from the burning oven. Rule, walk a circle around the cabin 10 times before bed every night. Asterisk, superstition. Even now, some things are more difficult to categorize. Don't get me wrong, Gran is wonderful. She feeds me and sings me to sleep and teaches me to tell a thistle sprig from a viper nettle. I never could have asked for a better caretaker. At the same time, there are things about my childhood I still don't understand. Never be caught in the hail, she told me once. I have distinct, vivid memories, sitting on her lap, watching granules hit the pine needles outside our home. After the hail turned to rain, we would both hurry outside to collect the frozen chunks by the handful. What Gran did with the hail we collected, I never figured out. What use could somebody have for bits of dirty ice? We would tie loose bits of thread around the trees by our house. Whenever my clothing grew too bare or my sleeves ripped, Gran would spend hours carefully unspooling the entire outfit. Then we would take the basket of threads to the pine trees, dig shallow holes, and wrap the threads around the base. It became a game. Yarning, I would call it. I would run in circles around the pine trees until I grew dizzy and fell to the dirt in a giggling heap. When I was done, we would fill in our holes to bury the threads. Trees are fickle creatures, Gran would tell me. They need a shorter leash than most, or they forget who they're loyal to. Us, no. She offered an odd smile. Not us. Why did we do that? What was the point? There are other order things I can't quite brush off to superstition. Like the hiker in Red Dot, his arrival is like a holiday, not in the sense of celebrations and fireworks, in the way something reoccurs every year. Every September 28th, we know to expect the hiker. He stumbles to our doorway, bedraggled and soaked in sweat, red shorts and red t-shirt. Please, he always say, I'm lost. Come in. Gran waves him in, gives him food and water, and listens to his story. He'd gone on a solo backpacking trip to the Sierras, but lost the trail. He was out of food, out of strength, and he'd been wandering for he couldn't remember how long now. Days, a week. Where is he now? This is the Deep Nords, and town is that way. Gran will point him towards the village. Eventually, he wanders off in that direction, seemingly to go find more help. But every year, he's back. What do you do? I finally asked him one year. Gran was out back fetching water where she couldn't hear us. She didn't like me prying too much into the hiker in red. Pardon, in the time you aren't here. What do you do all year in the forest before you come back? I don't. I'm not. His head jerked then. His eyes blinked rapidly, like a computer stuttering to restart. When he refocused on me, there was a new look in his eyes, something besides the scared desperation that was there year after year. A hunger, here you are. Gran said, coming back in with a jug of water. He blinked, and the look was gone. Perhaps it was my imagination. Perhaps the man had merely been annoyed, but in that brief second, there's lots of these things. Superstitions without reason or oddities without explanation. It's the way it's been for years, my entire life. Gran and me, the two of us, alone in our cottage in the heart of the DEEPWOOD. Until a week ago. Asterisk, I found a new void tree. I told Gran. Asterisk, asterisk. She looked up from her dream catcher, needle in one hand, thread in the other. A stack of completed ones sat on the porch table next to her rocking chair. A void tree, she asked. It's been years since I've spotted one. Just past the stream, inside that thicket of elms. I never thought to look inside, but it was right there, in the center of them all. An odd excitement lit her face. She hurried to her room to grab a spile and a bucket. Void trees. I've looked them up online before. I've asked Hollis and the other kids about them too. Far as I can tell, though, there's no such thing as a void tree outside of the deep woods. They're tall, with shockingly red bark and shockingly black leaves. I've never much cared for them. There's something unnameably disconcerting about them. But Gran hunts for them whenever we go out walking, usually to little success. Why don't you grow your own? I've asked her before. She only shook her head. Void trees don't work like that. I led her to the thicket of elms, and then through the gap between branches to the center. Sure enough, a void tree leered down at us. Gran wasted no time. She used a drill to make a hole in the trunk and a hammer to pound a spile into that hole. She hung a bucket from it. Well done, she told me. The eyes of youth are worth 100 eyes like mine. There's another oddity. Void tree sap. Gran collects it by the bucketful from a dozen different locations. As far back as I can remember, she harvests it throughout the year, then bottles it in jugs and stores it in our basement. Every once in a while, a jug will go missing. Whenever I've asked where the sap goes, she only pinches her lips once. I dipped my finger in one of the buckets and licked the sticky residue in front of her. It was bitter, not sweet like maple. She shook her head, made me wash off my hand, then lectured me for half an hour. It's too valuable to be eaten, she repeated. This new void tree was Christmas come early to her. She checked it every day that week, sometimes twice a day. In the evenings, she would lug buckets of sap back to our home to boil and can. Some days, I helped. Mostly, she seemed happy enough to do it herself, so I let her. And then on day 5, yesterday, she didn't show up. It wasn't like her. Gran was always home by sunset for our nightly ritual of circling the cabin. 10 times every night before bed, that was the superstition. She was always back by now. I checked the usual places, the stream where we would catch crawdads, the valley overlook she liked to walk to. I was about to make the trek to town to see if she'd gotten caught up at the general store when I thought of the void tree. She was unconscious when I found her. Dried blood crusted her forehead, and a thick, broken branch lay in the dirt beside her. It wasn't difficult to tell what had happened. Gran, wake up. I tried to rouse her, but she was unresponsive. I tried lifting her, but I've never been an especially strong girl. Eventually, even though I hated it, I left. I sprinted the entire way to town and screamed for Dr. McKenty. After another hour, well after dark had fallen, they finally managed to get Gran to the mini building that the town refers to as the hospital. She was already coming to by the time Dr. McKenty stuck her with an IV, but she was still groggy and confused. I sat with her until she finally seemed to recognize me. "Juniper," she said. "Hi, Gran. How are you feeling?" She smiled and reached for my hand. "My head, it aches. I remember going to check on the sap. A branch fell. It hit you, but they say you'll be all right." Her eyes went wide. "The cabin," she said. "Did we circle it already? I can't remember. For once, could she just give up these rituals? There was no time. You got hurt. We had to bring you here. Is it dark already?" She looked wildly for a window. When her eyes latched onto one, her expression went terrified. I'd never seen her look like that. "You have to go now, Juniper. Walk around the cabin 10 times and lock the door. You might still have time." "Gran, I'm not going to leave you. Nothing bad is going to happen. The deep wood is our home." The deep wood isn't our home," she said. "It's nothing but a stomach." She dug her nails into the back of my hand. Still, she wore that terrible, terrible expression, like something was irreparably wrong. "Go," she hissed. "Please." I did it was better for her rest if I left. That was my rationale. She didn't seem able to calm down with me there. No, to many, the forest is a terrifying place at night, but for me, it's the same as wandering down to your kitchen for a snack at midnight. Slightly creepy, yes. Not terrifying, though. The deep woods are my home. The trails are familiar. When I got to our cabin in the dark, I considered just going in, locking the door, and going to sleep. It had been a long couple of hours. Gran would question me in the morning. That much I was sure of. She'd ask me if I'd done the ritual, and I would have to lie to her. That's never been something I'm especially good at, nor have I cared. To be bad, fine then. I would do it 1, 2, 3, 4 times I walked around the cabin. I could have done it with my eyes closed after so many years of the ritual. Every bucket, bench, and bush around the cabin was known to me, the same places as always. 5. There was a snap from the darkness of the trees. Nothing unusual. 6. I paused. That sound. It was nothing. A raccoon, perhaps. 7. Something was off. There was a noise, almost like breathing, but heavier than any animal I knew of. I could feel it now. Whenever I passed by the front door, something was watching me from the foliage. Hello. I called out. Nothing. 8. I hurried faster. My walk turned into a run, but still I didn't risk turning on a flashlight. That would only let the thing see me as much as it would let me see it, and I knew our yard better than anyone else. Sticks cracked and leaves crunches as if the thing was approaching. 9. Only one more, I told myself. You're almost there. I had less than a rotation and I could throw myself inside, lock the door, be safe. The steady crunches turned to a pounding. The thing was sprinting for me. I flung open the cabin door, hurled myself inside, and slammed the door behind me. The 10th time. I hadn't finished. Thump. Something crashed into the wood. It scratched and scrabbled at walls. I reached up and twisted the bolt, heart pounding, breath heavy. The back door. Had I locked it earlier, for precious seconds I couldn't move. What was happening? What was trying to get inside? But then the pounding stopped. An audible footsteps skittered around the side of our house. I sprung up, threw myself at the back door, and slammed it locked just as the thing reached it. More scratching, more pounding. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though Gran couldn't hear me. I should have believed you. The frantic noises grew louder. The thing wanted in. It wanted me. The wood creaked. The hinges shuddered. The door was going to give in, and this creature was going to crack. Silence. After the single, echoing snap, the noises stopped. The thing went totally quiet. I waited for another half an hour, back against the door, knowing it would come back, but it never did. Eventually, I drifted off. In the morning, my eyes flitted open just before dawn. I would have stayed there in our cabin, eating our food storage until it ran out, if it meant I didn't have to ever go outside again. In the end, though, it was Gran's other superstition rules now that made me do it. Lock the door before sunset and unlock it before sunrise. I wouldn't risk disobeying one of them again from the front of the house. The deep woods seemed normal as always. Birds chirped overhead. But then I traveled to the back, the side the thing had been on when it went quiet. His expression was one of shock and horror, but mainly of death. The hiker in red was slung up between 4 or 5 trees, held up by dozens of assorted threads and bits of yarn. They didn't wrap around him like one might expect. They shot through him at every angle. One purple thread passed directly through his forehead. A single bead of blood had dried there. I could remember it. That snap of something being yanked backwards all at once. More than that, I recognized the threads. They were the ones Gran and I had looped around the pine trees for years. The remnants of my own retired clothing. The longer I looked, there was something else frozen in the hiker's expression besides surprise. Something that wasn't obvious at first, that hunger from long ago. An aching, senseless need to consume. For a long while, I just stared up into his face. Then I grabbed a bucket and headed for the void tree. Asterisk, I live in a cabin in the forest. I used to say the heart of the forest, but I know that isn't true now. There are lots of things my grandmother never explained to me, but once she's back from the hospital, I intend to question her about them, all of them. When she does, I'll keep you posted. I'll ask about her rituals and rules, but the first thing I plan to ask her is this. The deep wood is a stomach so. What is its food? Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. I used to like to go exploring in the woods. Not anymore. My name is Jake Summersville. My mum and dad both have advanced degrees in agricultural sciences, whatever that means. They would survey land, crops, sometimes even the local wildlife. I wasn't sure what exactly it was they did, but I knew it was why we moved around a lot. I didn't mind though. After all, I liked exploring. Sometimes pretending I was Indiana Jones, searching for some lost, ancient civilization. Sure, I've had my fair share of close calls, but nothing serious ever happened to me. At least, not until we moved to a small town in Missouri. I don't remember the name of it due to the mental trauma I experienced, or so my psychiatrist says. But I do remember Zach Mays. Zach was 9 years old that summer, the same age as me. He was into a lot of the same things I was, especially exploring. I met him when my parents moved into this farmhouse. It wasn't big or fancy or neat like the usual houses we rented, but it had a sort of rustic charm to it. Zach's parents owned the land the house was on and the property next door where they lived. They were friendly enough, even offering to help my parents get settled in. As they were handing the house keys to my parents, Zach came round the corner, held out his hand, and announced who he was. I was never the one to make friends, what with the constant moving around and what not. But something about Zach just clicked. We had moved at the start of summer break, so Zach and I had plenty of time to play. We'd mostly go exploring, capturing small animals and releasing them back into the wild. We had all of 4 acres to ourselves, except for the area near the edge of the property line. That was the start of the woods. Naturally, both of our parents forbade us from going in there, but we did anyways. We'd clear our own trails, pretending we were in a lush jungle. One time, Zach swore he saw a copperhead, but we never did find it. At first, we'd stay relatively close to the edge, but as time went on, we became more relaxed. Before long, we were trekking deep into the woods, able to find our way back with markers we'd given names to. One day, at the edge of the property line, we came across a patch of woods that was different somehow, darker ... Thorn bushes were common in the woods, but this place was completely covered in them. In fact, it was so thick we couldn't hope to gain entry. We walked around it for what seemed like hours, but never did find a way past those thorns. As time passed, we forgot about that place in the woods. After all, there was so much left to explore. To my delight, my parents told me that we were going to be here for a while, something to do with anomalies in the surrounding forest. Zach and I ended up in the same classes, and before we knew it, we were fast approaching Halloween. The forest, which was once green and beautiful, so full of life, had transitioned into a graveyard of fallen leaves and claws reaching despairingly into the sky. It was like they were begging the sky to return the leaves to them. On October 30th, Zach was staying over at my place for the night. It was just the two of us in the middle of nowhere. Our parents had gone to some boring adult dance party, where kids weren't allowed. We were sitting on the floor in front of the TV, watching horror movies, when out of nowhere, Zach elbowed me in the side. Scowling, I asked him what the big deal was, and his face lit up. "Do you remember that thorny part of the forest?" he asked. Yeah, I replied. Why? Let's go in there. Everything's dried up. We can cut through those thorns easily. Now, I was hesitant at first. Something about that idea seemed off. Seemed wrong. But I didn't want Zach to think I was a chicken, so reluctantly, I agreed. We grabbed our backpacks, stuffing them with supplies for our adventure. Zach placed a pair of garden shears and a spare flashlight in his, while I grabbed a map of the area, some batteries, and an extra flashlight for mine. We then grabbed our jackets and a pair of flashlights and then headed out the door towards the woods. The moon was blood red and full that night, bathing everything in that eerie hue. It was almost as if the very earth itself was stained with blood. It had been a while since either of us had been in the woods, what with school and all, but we found our landmarks with ease. I didn't know it at the time, but those landmarks would save my life. Before long, we were at the edge of the property line, staring at that part of the forest that we've never been able to enter before. Look, they're gone, exclaimed Zach. Sure enough, the thorn bushes had vanished. It was almost as if the forest itself wanted us to enter. There was something foreboding about this part of the forest. While the surrounding trees stretched their branches outwards in all directions, the trees in front of us grew closely together, their branches reaching inwards into the darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine, and suddenly I didn't want to go in there anymore. Zach must have felt it too, because he shivered for a moment. We flipped on our lights and peered into the darkness. Upon closer inspection, the thorns were still present. They just were cleared to form a path into the woods. Zach knelt down, a puzzled look on his face. I don't see any tracks, human or animal, going into the forest. Zach said, we concluded that someone or something must have cleared that path some time ago. Whatever had, it didn't look like it was still around or had been back in quite a long time. I didn't like it. The way the trees were so unnaturally bent made me feel as if the forest were waiting to swallow us whole. As ghastly as that sounded, that wasn't the most disturbing part. What was disturbing was I felt compelled to go into those woods. Zach and I looked at one another before moving on. We walked in between the thick trees, our flashlights providing the only source of light in the otherwise pitch-black woods. The night was silent, save for the sound the leaves made as we walked on top of them. I couldn't help thinking they sounded like bones crunching beneath our feet. Occasionally, the trees would part, allowing the moon's red hue to trickle down them like blood. I was relieved when we at last emerged from the forest into a clearing. The trees opened up to a flat field that had to be at least an acre, maybe more. The ground was barren, save for a few trees here and there. In the middle was what appeared to be a lake. I had grabbed a map earlier and pulled it out of my bag. I had our property drawn on it with the woods circled. There were no bodies of water anywhere near our property on the map. I handed the map to Zach, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. We couldn't have walked for more than 5 minutes, I said. Zach looked as confused as I was. We tried to locate ourselves on the map, but aside from the lake, there were no other defining features. At that moment, my gut was telling me to go back, to get the hell out of there. But then Zach started walking towards the lake, so I followed. He reached it before I did, and let out a gasp. Dude, come look at this, he said, in almost a whisper. It's not right. Those words would haunt me for the rest of my life. It almost felt as though my legs had a mind of their own, moving on their own accord. Before long, I was standing next to Zach at the edge of the water. It didn't take me long to see what he meant. Our reflections weren't in the water, but everything else was. Only ... different. A few trees grew along the shoreline. But what was reflected back was, well, I don't know what to call it. The trees, instead of being barren, were covered in what looked like flesh. It was then that I noticed we weren't the only things not reflected on the water's surface. The sky, blood, moon, and all, was also absent. In its place was a seemingly endless black void. That's so weird, ... Zach mumbled. Zach's voice freed me from my trance. He walked along the bank until he found what he was looking for, a stick. I don't think we should be here, I said to Zach, but he just ignored me. It was as if something was making him pick up that stick. As Zach approached the surface, I saw the water move as if there was something just beneath the surface. I tried to call out his name, but no sound came out of my mouth. I just stood there, frozen to the spot, as he knelt down, prodding the surface of the water with the stick. He did this a few times, then stood up and looked at me. "It's just water," he said, taking a step forward. It was then he lost his balance and fell backwards into the water, a look of surprise on his face. I expected him to break the surface once the splash had subsided, but he never did. At first, I thought he was fooling around, but seconds turned to minutes, and I realized ... he wasn't pranking me. I ran towards the spot where he had fallen into, the lake, slowing as I approached the edge, not wanting to touch the surface. I shone my light into the murky depths, scanning for any sign of my friend. As I was about to give up, I saw it. Zach's flashlight was on, except it was near the entrance into the forest that was reflected in the water. I looked back at where we had entered, seeing no flashlight, but when I returned my gaze to the lake, there it was. It never crossed my mind to run back and call the police, and even if it had, what would I tell them? That my friend fell into a lake and was transported to some alternate nightmarish reality. Yeah, right, like they would believe me. I wouldn't have believed me if I hadn't seen it with my own. Eyes began to shiver uncontrollably. It wasn't that it was particularly cold that night. It was the thought of what I had to do. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the ground a few feet from the bank before taking my bag off. I unzipped it and stuck my hand inside the opening and pulled out the spare flashlight. I turned it on and laid it next to my phone, its beam pouring into the water. I didn't have a signal here, but I could get one near the barn, and I wanted it ready because, well, I had a very unsettling feeling. I slowly approached the water's edge, not knowing what to expect. I inhaled deeply and jumped in, feet first. What I felt next is hard to describe. It was cold, very cold, as if I had jumped into ice water, and I felt as though my insides were being torn inside out. It was like vertigo, but not quite the same. It was as if I had lost all my senses, including direction. When I emerged from the lake, I took a huge breath of stale, dry air. I climbed out of the water and looked around. I was there, in the nightmare forest. Up ahead, I could see Zach's flashlight abandoned on the ground next to his backpack. Was about to call out his name when I saw them. The garden shears he brought lay broken in two on the ground, and each blade was coated in thick blood. I picked them up, not wanting to be out here defenseless. The forest was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The trees were covered in tendrils of flesh, wet and pulsing, as if alive. The world was dimly lit, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I looked up at the sky, but saw only darkness. No moon, no stars, just pitch black darkness. I felt as though if I were to jump, I would be consumed by that darkness. And again, the feeling of being SW1, a loud hole, rushed over me as I walked. The forest floor made a mix of a squishing sound followed by a dull thud, as though there was metal beneath the flesh. I followed the path into the woods, headed back towards my house. Here and there were pieces of Zach's clothing stuck to the trees. It looked as if he was running from something. I made it out of the thicker forest, back into familiar territory, if you could call it that. All of our landmarks were there, albeit somewhat hard to make out due to the flash. I was almost to the edge when I heard a blood-curdling scream. It was Zach. I ran faster than I thought I ever could, the foul air burning my lungs as I took short breaths. I slowed as I reached the clearing, unable to breathe. Parts of Zach's pants lay in tatters on the ground, with a large amount of blood, leading towards the barn. The barn was a stark contrast to the forest. It was comprised not of wood, but of rusted metal, and though the tendrils climbed up the perimeter, they didn't extend more than maybe 3 feet. I approached the doors cautiously, holding a blade in each hand, and pushed them open. What I saw next, I'd never forget. Zach's body was hung on a meat hook, its jagged edge protruding through his right upper chest. His shirt was soaked in blood, which traveled down his legs. His pants were shredded, and where his feet used to be were mangled lumps of meat with bits of bone sticking out at odd angles. It looked like something had chewed them off, and I shuddered at the thought of what did this to him. Beneath him was a steadily growing puddle of blood. I would have thought him dead had he not looked up at me. Slowly, he reached his left hand into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it out to me. As his arm stretched, he mouthed the words, "Get out," though all that came out of his mouth was a gurgling sound, followed by blood. I put the blades down and took it, then watched as my friend took his last breath. I looked at his phone and saw he had taken a picture of what had attacked him. It was human-like, but distorted. Its legs and arms were long and lanky, skin stretched, thinly over bone. It had a small tail, like what you would see on a tadpole. Its feet and hands both ended in 4 digits, each complete with long, sharp claws. Its spine protruded from its back and looked as if it would tear right through at any moment. It had a neck twice as long as a normal human, with a round head at the end. It was facing downwards in the picture, so I couldn't see what its face looked like. I looked up and noticed that Zach wasn't the only one hanging in the barn. There were several bodies, each in varying stages of decomposition, hanging from hooks. Some were bones picked clean of flesh, while others looked as though they had been hanging there for months. At that point, I doubled over and threw up, and when I raised my head, I saw it. The creature. Its face was something straight out of a nightmare. Where its face should have been was a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, sunken into the head. It kind of reminded me of the giant maw of the Kraken as it devoured one of Odysseus' ships. On either side were 2 small, beady black eyes as dark as the night sky. As it lunged at me, I fell backwards, my thumb hitting the camera button. A bright light flashed from the phone, and the creature stumbled backwards, emitting a horrible, screeching noise that sounded like a dozen birds going through a meat grinder. I got to my feet and ran, bolting from the barn into the woods, the creature still screeching madly. I heard multiple screeches echo from within the woods as I ran. Just how many of those things were out there, I didn't want to know. My body moved on autopilot, following the markers that Zach and I had followed so many times before. At one point, I saw one running at me on all 4s from my right side. Instinctively, I took its picture, glad to see it stumble and fall. I ran into the thicket of trees that led to the lake, sprinting as quickly as I could without falling over. As I made it into the clearing, I fell and felt a searing pain shoot down from my left leg into my foot. One of the creatures had dug its claws into me and was dragging me back into the woods. Zach's phone had fallen a few feet from me, and I couldn't reach it. To my right was his bag with a spare flashlight sticking out from the top. I grabbed it. I never prayed so hard in my life like I did that night in the woods. Please God, let it work. Please God, let it work. I muttered as I pointed it towards the creature and flipped the switch on. Immediately, a beam of light shone from the flashlight directly into the creature's face. It released me, retreating back into the darkness, howling in pain. I half ran, half limped to the water's edge. All the while, the screeches of the creatures grew in volume behind me. Reflected in it was my world. Trees without flesh, a sky alight with stars, and a forest devoid of those ... things. I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the water, not caring about the return of that vertigo feeling. I emerged from the surface and took in a deep breath of air that didn't taste like death. I pulled myself onto the shore and collapsed, panting. I lay there, listening for those creatures to break the surface, but they never did. I turned off the flashlight by my phone, put them in my bag, and began limping into the forest. As I made my way through the dark thicket, I heard the screeching of one of those creatures. I turned round, fumbling with the flashlight, and dropped it, causing the bulb to shatter. I turned and ran, not noticing the pain in my leg, and not stopping until I had reached the barn. With the adrenaline fading, I collapsed beneath the light above the doors. For a second, I could have sworn that I saw one of those things lurking in the woods. I wasted no time. I pulled my phone from out of my pocket and called the police, telling them my friend had been killed. I don't know how long I sat there. It felt like an eternity. I was beyond happy to hear the sirens as they approached. I don't remember much else of that night. I know my parents were there, pale as ghosts when they saw my leg as I sat in the ambulance. I saw Zach's parents there as well. His mother was on her knees, face buried in her hands, crying. His father just stood there, one arm on his crying wife, his face devoid of any emotion. At that point it all became a blur. I awoke the next morning in the hospital, my parents asleep in the bed next to mine. Apparently, I had lost a lot of blood from my wound and had passed out. I remember feeling uneasy at the thought of having someone else's blood inside of me. The police questioned me, and I told them everything. I told them about the forest, about the lake, the nightmarish worlds, and the creatures. I even told them how to find it. They didn't believe me, of course, and I had left Zach's phone back by the lake. They surmised that Zach and I were attacked by an animal, and after seeing it maul my friend to death, my mind, influenced by the Halloween movies, created that world to cope with the trauma. Nonetheless, the police formed a search party and went into the woods, searching for what remained of Zach's body. They never did find it, nor did they find that patch of woods that led to the lake. It was as if that part of the forest simply disappeared. I had to take physical therapy as well as talk to a shrink regularly. My leg recovered, but I never stopped having nightmares from that night, even though it's been years since it happened. My parents didn't stay in that town long after that, and I was glad. I hated the looks the other kids at school would give me, or how they would keep asking what really happened out there in the woods. Now, whenever my parents have work, they make sure to rent a house in town, far from any nearby woods. Sometimes, though late at night, I can hear that creature in the distant woods, screeching in a mix of anger and hunger. Hunger, ... for me. Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into Story 3. I can't believe that you're making me do this, I said to my brother as I caught my breath going up the stairs in my childhood building. Trust me, I've tried everything else. There's no other way. I hadn't been back here since our parents died last year in that freak accident, a gas leak from the stove, with all the windows closed. We had those old school, double casement wooden windows. I knew my dad would always leave at least one open, no matter how cold it was, because he liked a little breeze. But that day, all the windows were shut, as if someone wanted them to die. My brother swore it was the building itself. He said it had been cursed since we had that which living on the second floor many years ago, a cousin of my dad's, before the family knew of her ways and kicked her out, or, in other stories, burned her alive to rid the world of her evil. Either way, everyone in our neighborhood swore she cursed the building. Everyone but our family, who denied she was even a witch and claimed their cousin simply lived in another country, but that the apartment was still hers. Every time something freaky happened in our building that either made someone completely leave or get seriously hurt, my father would say it was just a freak accident, and that those happen all the time. Only people with a fluid imagination and lots of time on their hands would think it was something more. People love myths and rumors, he would always say. We reached the second floor, just in front of the door of the infamous apartment. It was just after sunset, and it was starting to get dark. There was no electricity in the building since nobody lived there anymore, and it was becoming harder and harder to see. My brother and I exchanged looks. We had always been terrified of that apartment, and would always run past it when we were. Young, I hadn't thought about it in years since I moved out. I knew the look in his eyes. He wanted us to run up and not spend more time in front of it. He didn't need to say it. Come on, don't be ridiculous. It's just an empty apartment, I said dismissively. Suit yourself, he said. I got closer and put my hand on the door. I didn't know what I was expecting to happen. Feel the wood burning, maybe. But there was nothing like that. All I felt was how dusty the door was. I put my head against the wood, just to see if I could hear anything. Just an intrusive thought. I heard nothing. It was hollow, just the sound of air. But suddenly I heard footsteps, heavy, not walking, running, toward the door. I pulled my head away instantly and started running up, even though, realistically, I should have been running down and out. Without asking, my brother followed me. We both ran until I stopped on the 4th floor, panting, my hands on my knees, dripping with sweat. What the fuck happened? My brother asked, also gasping. I heard someone running towards the door. Are you sure? It can't be. Nobody lives there. I know what I heard. I'm not crazy, I exclaimed, starting to regret listening to him. Dude, what are we doing here? This is the only way. I told you, I spoke with this guy Fathy, and he said I need to lift the curse before I can do anything with the building. Otherwise, people will keep leaving, or worse, get hurt. You know, Mum and Dad were the last 2 people adamant about not leaving, and we know what happened to them. Hate to say this, but now that they're gone, I can finally do something with the building they left us. I'll demolish the damn thing and build over it, but we gotta take care of this one thing first. Did you bring the roses like I asked you? Yes, I brought your stupid roses. The right colors. Yes, fucking purple, yellow, and red. Why does it have to be these 3 colors? I can't remember exactly, but the guy said something about purple representing admitting wrongdoing, yellow representing asking for forgiveness, and red representing a sacrifice. A sacrifice. No, just a metaphor. We don't actually have to sacrifice anything. At least, that's what he said. I don't know about that, man. Seems sketchy to me, I said, frightened. He grabbed me by both arms aggressively, eyes bulging, teeth clenched. Listen, bro, this is our last chance. This motherfucker cost me a lot of money to tell me what I needed to do. This building is also standing there, bleeding money. I'm done with this fucky. I'm done with this witch. I want to get this over with. Let's get this done and get out of here. It's only a small window of time before it gets darker. Then we'd have to come back on a different day. We're already on the 4th floor. Let's get this done, okay? Me, not really sure if I was doing the right thing, okay? We started going up to the last floor where we used to live. I was shivering. My emotions were all over the place. I was feeling kind of nostalgic for the place I spent most of my life, but it also felt cold, freezing, like it had been overtaken by something else, something darker, but maybe it was just my imagination. We made it to the last floor. We heard a rhythmic creaking. I stopped in my place and looked at him. No matter how tough he wanted to look, he was my brother. I could read the terror in his eyes. It's just the old baby swing. It's kind of windy today. It's winter. After all, he said. I didn't argue. The last floor entrance was kind of open anyway, no ceiling, so that could explain why it was moving. But as soon as we stepped towards the door, the swing stopped, like dead stopped, not even slowing. Down. How do you explain this? I exclaimed. He didn't answer me. I saw him audibly gulp, and then he started making his way toward the door. He walked sideways in front of the swing, as if trying not to touch whoever or whatever was on it. If so, it started swinging lightly. When he came closer, squeak, squeak. It went on swinging slowly. It frightened the both of us. He turned around and started rummaging with the key in the keyhole. It took him a second to find the right one, also because he was shaking insanely. Finally, he found the right one. He put it in and listened as the door unlocked. He opened it slowly. The creak itself, sounding like an old woman's cackle, made me uncomfortable. I hadn't felt like that since I was a little kid. Bring the damn rose, he asked. I came closer to him and looked inside my jacket. I took out the first one, the purple. So what do you need to do? I asked. He said I need to leave it on the carpet in the middle of the living room, then get out, close the door, and wait for a minute. If we open it again and it's gone, then it was accepted, and if it's still there, then we need to get the hell out of here, as fast as we can. I didn't know which result I was more afraid of. Both were equally terrifying. Do you want to go first? He asked. What? We didn't even talk about me doing anything. I'm just here for support. I screamed at him. All right, fine. I'll take the first one. He stepped in slowly. I peeked after him. It was pretty dark inside, and cold, extremely cold, with a draft of rotten air coming from inside, as if the bodies of my parents were still there. I wondered where that draft was coming from, as I was sure we closed all windows after. We took them out of the apartment and buried them. I watched him quietly walk into the middle of the living room, and there was silence. Not just the silence of an empty apartment, but even the world's noise around us stopped when he stepped in. In shaking steps, he placed the rose on the floor carefully, didn't dare to look around, ran back quickly and shut the door. He was panting, shaking, sweating, even though it was freezing, eyes bulging. N-N-N-O-W. What? I asked. W. We wait for a minute. We stood in silence, looking at the watch and peeking our ears at the door, trying to hear anything. There was nothing, just the loud noise of the moving watch hands. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Okay, it's a minute. Let's open up, I said. He turned the knob slowly and peeked from behind the door. Oh my God, he exclaimed. What is it? I asked nervously. It's gone. The rose is gone. The idea of it sent a shiver down my spine. I shook. I didn't even want to imagine who or what picked it up. Okay. Go put the second one, I said. Isn't it your turn now? Come on, dude. Just go. I'll do the last one. Fuck. Okay. He stepped in again with the same careful steps and placed the yellow rose on the carpet. Came back as fast as the last time. Dot tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Okay. You go check now if it's gone, and then put the last one, he said. I nodded against my will. I opened the door slowly and peeked from the corner. I looked inside. My eyes were blurry, still adjusting to the darkness, as it was getting darker by the minute. I couldn't see anything at all. Forget the rose. I was so nervous I couldn't even see the carpet. Asterisk. What's taking you so long? Is it there or is it not? He asked. Wait a second. My eyes are blurry. I think it's gone. Oh, thank God, he said. Go put the last one. Hey, what if it's a trap? He stood for a second, not saying anything, thinking about it. I don't think so. Everything is working like this guy said it would. If it was a trap, something would have happened the second time I went in. Right. Okay, go on then. Don't overthink it. Okay, I'll go. I stepped in slowly, knees shaking like crazy. Every atom in my body screamed at me to run back. The silence was deafening. I was at the brink of collapsing, heavy breathing, sweating. I kneeled down and felt with my hands if the other rose was there. It wasn't, so I put my right hand in my jacket's inside pocket to pull the last rose. Then I heard a loud flick. I froze. I closed my eyes, waited for something to happen. I was ready to go. Dad, I heard a voice calling, a little girl's voice. I opened my eyes slowly. There was a light coming from the back. Dad, is that you? The little girl called again. I turned and saw the light coming from the kitchen, on the right side of the door, where my brother's silhouette stood, frozen. I couldn't see his face because the light was coming from behind him. But that's not what I was looking at first. I was looking at the floor leading to the kitchen. There was a little girl sleeping on the floor, peeking her head up a little, looking scared. W. What are you doing here? I came with Mum earlier. She said you'd meet us here. I must have fallen asleep because I was tired. When I woke up, it was very dark and I was scared, she said quietly, her voice breaking. Dad, can you please take me? I'm scared. My parental instincts kicked in. I forgot about everything and immediately stood up, went to her and picked her up. She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and buried her face in my chest. She was extremely cold. Oh baby, I'm sorry. You must have been scared to death. I'm still scared, Daddy. I'm here now, baby. Don't be. I turned around slowly to my brother. I was slowly starting to see his features again, as my eyes adjusted to the lights. Suddenly, I remembered again why we were here. His eyes were bulging. He was visibly shaking, cold sweat running down his face. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Who? Were you talking to right now?" he asked, frightened. "The kid. My daughter. Yo, you don't have a daughter." And the door slammed shut. Story 3 ends here, now. Listen closely to story 4. The train station was nearly empty, the platform slick with morning dew and the faint scent of rusted metal. I stood alone beneath the overcast sky, the letter trembling slightly in my hand as I read it. Again, though, I had already memorized every word. "Dear grandson, good news. The townsfolk found your parents. Return home quickly." Since Aralithy handwriting was unmistakable sharp, deliberate strokes that hadn't changed in decades. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket, my heart pounding, with a strange mix of hope and dread. After nearly 20 years of silence of believing my parents had vanished without a trace they had been found, the thought seemed impossible. And yet, there I was, boarding a train bound for Straya, the last city before the mountains swallowed the land. The journey took 12 hours, winding through valleys and forests that grew denser and darker the farther the train traveled. I stared out the window, watching the landscape shift from familiar to forgotten, my reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost. That night, I stayed in a modest inn on the edge of Straya, sleep eluding me. At dawn, I unfolded the brittle, hand-drawn map Illy had given me years ago, one I had tried to follow before, always without success. The ink had faded, the paper creased and worn, but the path was still there, a narrow trail leading into the forest, marked only by memory and moss. With the map in hand, I left the edge of Straya behind and stepped onto the trail. It was barely, marked more suggestion than road winding between tall pines and beech trees whose trunks leaned in like silent sentinels. The morning light filtered through the canopy in pale shafts, catching on the mist that clung low to the ground. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air grew cooler, damp with the scent of moss and stone, and the sounds of the city faded behind me like a dream. The trail began to climb slowly at first, then more steeply as the forest thickened. Roots twisted across the path like veins, slick with moisture, and the underbrush grew dense and dark. I paused often not to rest, but to listen. There were no birds, no wind, only the soft crunch of my boots and the occasional drip of water from the leaves. The trees here were ancient, their bark furred with lichen, their branches heavy with silence. I passed a crumbling stone marker, half swallowed by ivy, etched with symbols I didn't recognize, but felt I should. The mist thickened as I climbed, curling around my legs and shoulders. Time seemed to stretch. I could no longer tell how long I had been walking, and then, just as the trail seemed to vanish into the undergrowth, the forest opened. The trees parted like curtains, revealing a hollow nestled in the mountainside. There, shrouded in fog and shadow, stood the village of Lunka. Stone cottages with moss-covered roofs clustered round a narrow square, their windows dark and still. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, though I heard no voices, no movement. It was exactly as I remembered, untouched, as if preserved in amber. I stood at the edge of the clearing, breath caught in my throat, heart pounding. Whether by luck or fate, I had found my way home. I stepped into the village like I was walking into a dream. The mist curled around my legs as I crossed the square, muffling the sound of my footsteps. The cottages stood in quiet formation, their stone walls slick with moisture, roofs sagging beneath thick layers of moss. Wooden shutters hung slightly askew, and the windows reflected only grey sky. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys, but the air was still too still. Then a voice broke the silence. "Welcome back," said Ionel, standing outside the butcher's shop, cleaver in hand. He looked exactly as I remembered. Broad-shouldered, apron-stained, face unchanged by time. Not a wrinkle more, not a hair out of place. Others appeared as I moved through the square. Mercia, the farmer, hauling a sack of grain with the same slow rhythm. The Drogan family, herding goats across the cobblestones, the children waving shyly. Every face was familiar, every gesture preserved. They greeted me warmly, kindly, but none of them said my name. I tried to ask about my parents, about the letter, but the answers were always the same: gentle, vague, and evasive. "They're being looked after," someone said. "You'll see them soon," said another dot. No one offered more than that. After a while, I stopped asking. With nothing else to do, I made my way toward my grandfather's house. The path was overgrown, but unmistakable. The leaning pine still stood watch over the roof. The door creaked open before I could knock. Il-Lai stood in the doorway, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp, his smile tight. "You made it," he said, pulling me into a brief, firm hug. "I wasn't sure you would." Inside, the house was preserved like a memory, dustless still. My childhood room waited for me. Untouched, same desk, same faded quilt, same faint scent of pine and old paper. It was as if I had never left. At lunch, Illy served a thick moss-coloured stew. I hesitated, then took a bite. The taste was earthy, familiar, strangely comforting. He watched me eat, saying little. When I asked about my parents, Illy's gaze drifted to the window. "There with Serena," he said. "The healer. She's been taking care of them. You'll see them soon." That night, the village was silent. I wandered the narrow paths, past shuttered windows and flickering lanterns. The mist had thickened, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something else, something sweet and earthy. I paused. At the old well in the square, a memory surfaced. My mother's voice, warning me not to look too deep. "Things live in the dark," she had whispered once, her hand tight around mine. Back in my room, I lay awake, listening. The silence pressed in from all sides. No crickets, no wind. Just the slow, rhythmic creak of the house settling into the earth. And then, just before sleep took me, I heard it a faint rustling beneath the floorboards, like roots shifting in the soil. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was the feeling of damp earth pressing against my skin. In the dream, I was lying beneath the forest floor, not buried just beneath, as if the soil had grown around me. I could see the roots above me, tangled and pulsing faintly with light, like veins beneath translucent skin. They moved slowly, rhythmically, as though breathing. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't anything. I felt calm, still, whole. Somewhere in the distance, I heard voices not speaking, exactly, but murmuring in a language I didn't know and somehow understood. They weren't calling to me. They were remembering me. I reached up, and the roots reached down. When I awoke, my hands were clenched around the bedsheets, damp with sweat. The morning light was pale and cold, filtering through the curtains like mist. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, the dream still clinging to me like fog. The rustling was gone. but the silence remained. Over the next few days, I wandered the village, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. The stillness that had once felt peaceful now unsettled me. The villagers moved with the same quiet rhythm, their smiles unchanged, their eyes just a little too distant. I asked again about my parents. Illy deflected, as always. "They're resting," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You'll see them soon." His tone was gentle, but final, like a door quietly closing. I stopped asking. Asterisk, asterisk, but the silence only made the questions louder. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from me. A few nights later, over dinner, Illy mentioned it casually, as if it were nothing. "I'll be out late tonight," he said, ladling another spoonful of stew into my bowl. "Serena's been tending the garden by moonlight. Says the moss grows better that way." I nodded, pretending not to care. And something in his voice too light, too rehearsed stuck with me. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. I watched from the upstairs window as Illy stepped into the mist, lantern in hand, and made his way down the path toward the edge of the village. I counted to 50, then followed. The air was colder than before, the mist thicker. My footsteps were nearly silent on the moss-covered ground. I kept my distance, ducking behind trees and fences, heart pounding with every step. At the far end of Lunker, Illy reached Serena's house and opened the door like it belonged to him. No hesitation, no knock, just the soft creak of old hinges as he stepped inside and quietly shut it behind him. I crouched low behind a thicket of ferns across the path. Breath held. The mist had thickened here, curling around the garden like a veil. The house stood in stillness, no candlelight in the windows, no voices, no movement, just silence. I waited. A minute passed, then another. No footsteps, no conversation, not even the sound of Illy moving inside. It was as if the house had swallowed him whole. Right beside the house was an unfenced garden, wild and overgrown. The mist hung low over the ground, curling around the edges of moss-covered stones and pale, flowering fungi that glowed faintly in the moonlight. At first, I thought they were statues. Two figures stood near the center of the garden, side by side, motionless. They were tall, human-shaped, and dressed in clothing that looked oddly familiar. I squinted through the haze, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The coat dark wool, frayed at the cuffs, the shawl white with a faded red floral pattern. My eyes widened. I knew those clothes. I hadn't seen them in decades, but I remembered them clearly. My father's coat, my mother's shawl. I stepped closer, heart thudding. The figures were too still. Their posture, two perfect shoulders, gently sloped, hands folded just so, like they had been arranged, preserved. Then I saw their skin. It was smooth, too smooth. Not like flesh, but something else, something grown. The texture looked soft and pale, almost waxy, with faint green veins running just beneath the surface. My stomach turned, and their faces were incomplete, where their eyes should have been. There were only dark recesses at first glance. They looked hollow, like empty sockets carved into smooth, pale skin. But as I leaned in, I saw movement, not emptiness. Growth. Moss filled the voids, thick and dark, threaded with delicate filaments that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. It wasn't just growing. There it was nesting, layered and dense, like something cultivated. Tiny tendrils curled outward from the sockets, twitching slightly, as if tasting the air. Then, as I stared, the moss shifted, not with the breeze, there was none but with intention. The filaments stirred, recoiled, then slowly unfurled again. It was as though the moss itself was aware of me, watching me without eyes. I stumbled back, a gasp caught in my throat. My foot snapped a twig. A light flickered in the window. Illy appeared behind the glass, his face half lit by a lantern. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He just looked at me, right into me. I ran, branches clawed at my coat as I tore through the mist. Back toward the house. My thoughts were a blur, memories, questions, panic. I didn't stop until I reached the front door, slammed it shut behind me, and leaned against it, chest heaving. I had to leave, now. I grabbed my bag from the bedroom, shoved in what little I had brought, and turned to go. My hand was on the doorknob when I heard its footsteps on the porch. I opened the door. They were waiting, Doran and Anka, my parents, standing in the pale light, smiling. Their faces were complete now. The mossy hollows had been filled eyes that looked almost human, but not quite. Too still, too green. Illy stood behind them, his expression unreadable. "We've missed you," my parents said, in perfect unison. "You're almost ready." I slammed the door shut. My parents' voices still echoed in my ears, soft, synchronized, wrong. I backed away from the threshold, heart pounding. The image of their two still eyes seared into my mind. Illy hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. I bolted the door and stumbled down the hallway, pacing in tight, frantic circles. I had to leave. I had to get out of Lunka before whatever had taken them came for me too. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bagno, second-guessing, no looking back. I didn't even bother with the map. I knew the trail. I walked it just days ago. Before slipping out the back door, I snatched a kitchen knife, just in case. The village was quiet but not empty. I could feel it, eyes in the mist, shapes that didn't move quite right. I reached the edge of the square, heart hammering only to stop cold. They were all there. Everyone blocking the path. Everyone except the ones pretending to be my parents and Illy. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. They were coming. I pulled out the knife and held it steady, warning them to stay back. But no one flinched. Anka, Doran, and Illy stopped just a few feet in front of me. "Don't leave," Anka said softly. "Come, stay with us. You'll be one of us soon." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You'll find out soon enough," Doran replied, his tone calm to calm. "I don't want to," I shouted. "I just want to leave. Don't try to stop me, or I'll hurt you." "There's no need for violence," Anka said gently. "Come, give your mother a hug. Everything will be okay." She stepped forward, arms outstretched, as if to embrace me. I raised the knife and slashed her hand. Her thumb fell to the ground. She didn't react. Her expression didn't change. That same cold smile remained frozen on her face. Where her thumb had been, there was no moss, dense and dark, growing from within. Behind me, the crowd shifted. An opening had formed. "You may leave," Anka said. "You're not ready yet, but soon you will be." I backed away slowly, eyes darting between the figures. Their gazes never left me. When I was far enough, I turned and ran straight into the misty trail I knew so well, not daring to look back. Asterisk, asterisk, the mist swallowed me whole. Branches clawed at my arms as I tore through the underbrush, the trail barely visible beneath the shifting fog. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Behind me, the silence of Lunka pressed in like a weight, unnatural and absolute. I didn't dare look back. The forest thickened, the trees older, here twisted, gnarled, watching. I knew this path. I had walked it just days ago. Now every step felt unfamiliar, foreign. The knife trembled in my grip. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. But then, through the thinning mist, I saw it. A wooden signpost, half frotted and leaning, pointing towards Strand. Relief surged through me sharp, overwhelming. I was close. The trees began to thin, the air lightening with every step. I stumbled out of the forest and onto a gravel road. In the distance, lights flickered warm, steady, human, real. STRAJA. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, the knife still clenched in my hand. I was out. I had made it. I dropped the blade and forced myself to my feet, heading straight for the inn I had stayed at before. The staff looked up in alarm as I entered, my clothes torn, my skin scratched and streaked with moss and dirt. "What happened to you?" one of them asked, eyes wide. "Hiking accident," I said quickly. "I just need to rest." They didn't press further. A room was prepared, and I was left alone. The room was quiet, but sleep didn't come easily. Even with the door locked and the curtains drawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Not in the literal sense. There were no footsteps, no shadows at the window, just a presence, a weight, as if the forest hadn't let me go completely. I lay still for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the radiator and the occasional creak of the old unsettling. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were thick and slow. I wandered through endless woods, the ground soft beneath my feet, the air damp and sweet. I could feel something pulsing beneath the soil, like breath. I woke with dirt under my nails. The days passed in a blur. I stayed inside mostly, claiming exhaustion. The innkeeper brought me food, asked polite questions I barely answered. I told myself I was recovering, that I just needed time. But I found myself drawn to the darker corners of the city, the shaded alley behind the bakery, the mossy stone wall near the church. I lingered there longer than I meant to, breathing in the damp, earthy air. I stopped answering calls. The voices on the other end felt distant, like echoes from a life I'd already left behind. On the 5th day, I packed my bag at the train station. The sky was overcast, the platform nearly empty. I stood alone, watching the tracks disappear into the trees. The wind stirred the leaves, and for a moment, I thought I heard something soft, like movement beneath the ground. Then, a whisper, faint, familiar, "Come home." I closed my eyes. My fingers curled into fists. Come home. The train's horn cut through the air. I stepped forward. "No," I said under my breath. "Not this time." The doors opened. I boarded without looking back. As the train pulled away, the forest receded into mist. I sat by the window, watching the trees blur into shadow, the sound still faint in the back of my mind. But I kept going. Story 4 ends here and now. We enter the fog of Story 5. Every mile I found myself regretting the recruiter's offer a little more. The pay was good, too good. As I eyed the dilapidated houses with blankets over the windows and abandoned gas stations, it became clear why. Relics of a long-past oil boom dotted the landscape in the form of crumbling manors. The main strip reveled in apparent attempts to preserve some of the town's dignity. It was a shame fresh paint and flowers could only offer so much charm. The hospital came out of nowhere as I took the last bend. It was tucked inside the heart of the county, with woods flanking on either side. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen so many trees. My assignments were typically in hospitals, precariously set in the middle of busy cities where the sirens never stopped and parking spots were a hot commodity. The building was squat and only half the letters on the sign lit up, but smiling people chatted with each other on the sidewalk, and staff in brightly colored scrubs greeted patients like old friends. I threw my backpack over my shoulders and headed in. The sliding door squeaked, and I braced myself for the scrutiny of a security guard. Instead, I was met with a cheerful hello from the associate behind the front desk. I looked around the cozy lobby and felt myself relax. The lobby was bathed in warm, muted colors, and well-loved houseplants lined the windows. The murmur of daytime television gave the air a sense of lulling. "Hi," my voice betrayed my nerves. "I'm the new traveler." "Oh, you must be Talia," she gushed. "We've been so excited to meet you. It's always a treat to have a new face around here. I'm Crystal, by the way. Make yourself at home. I'll call Kim. She's the nursing director. You'll love her." I smiled and sat in one of the patterned chairs, idly rubbing the worn grain of the armrests. Kim wasted no time busting in through the door, a smile plastered on her face almost as bright her hot pink scrubs. She was a far cry from the pantsuit and scowls I was accustomed to management sporting. "Talia, is it? We are just thrilled to have an extra set of hands. Come on, honey, let's get you settled." She rattled off facts as she walked me down the hall. It was a 13-bed critical access hospital with a surprisingly busy emergency room that served surrounding rural community. A central nurses' station looked down to short halls and a meager trauma bay. Most of the equipment seemed familiar, just on a much smaller scale than I was used to. The paint was chipped and the furniture outdated, but the space was clearly well loved. It was more than I could say for many of my previous assignments. Kim took me to HR to get my paperwork started after her tour and explained my schedule. She would have me go through an expedited orientation for a day and then 2 weeks on day shift before I was sent 2 nights for the remainder of my assignment. I shuddered at the thought. Truth be told, I was sick of the night shift. Every hospital I had been to seemed a little more intimidating at night, and the longer I worked the shifts, the further shadows seemed to stretch in the corners. I could feel the breath stealing from my lungs and my vision blacking out at the thought of those dark fingers stretching closer, ever closer, strangling me in the broad daylight. "Talia, are you okay?" Kim frowned, genuine concern lining her face. I forced out a shuddered breath. "Of course, I'm just tired from traveling." "Well, dear, we really are glad to have you. Your family while you're here." I faked a smile and nodded along. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur as I finished up the last of my training. "It's too bad you're on nights. We'll miss you," one of the day nurses told me. Instinctively, I searched for the lie in the words, almost annoyed when I found only authenticity. "I couldn't do it," another chimed in. "The ghost stories freak me out too much." "Don't scare her." She rested a hand on my forearm, and I bit back my aversion to the touch. "They are kind spirits." The other nurse snorted. "Tell that to the last traveler." Hair raised on the back of my neck. "What happened to them?" She waved her hand in dismissal. "Don't worry about it. You belong here." I rolled her words about belonging, the lie leaving a bitter ash on my tongue as I drove to my first night shift. The lights of the hospital did little to banish the shadows. Instead, they seemed to suck in the softness of the building to leave nothing but sharp edges. Inside, the fluorescence seemed dim without sunlight. The ceilings were too low and the halls too narrow. Reflections warped off linoleum floor that had been waxed too many times. I swallowed hard. It was all in my mind. It always was. I was joining 3 nurses on this shift who greeted me with the same enthusiasm everyone else had. 3 things you gotta do on our shift. 1. Leave the supply closet cracked. 2. The lights stay off in the therapy room. Nobody uses it at night anyway. 3. Don't bother the night janitor. He's real grumpy, but he can get a bloodstain out of anything. You can talk to Rosa. The other night, janitor, but she doesn't speak English. Cassie rattled the list off without so much as pausing for a breath of air. Taylor must have seen the questions in my eyes. When the air turns on at night, it makes a knocking sound. On the door and the wiring is bad in the therapy room, it flickers a lot. I didn't notice on days, Kate laughed. Day shifters don't notice anything. I'll show you the extra stuff we do at night. If we get done fast enough and the ER is slow, we have a lot of fun around here. My initial unease faded. Fast, the ER kept us so busy those first couple of weeks that I didn't have time to think about it. We made for a great team, and I found myself relaxing on shift for the first time in years. Fall painted the landscape anew, and I found myself seeing the beauty in this little town more with each passing day. Perhaps I had been too quick to latch on to the flaws. The community did have a certain charm about it. I sat at the nurse's desk alone, scrolling through my phone long enough that when I looked up, the dim lights seemed jarring. The busy summer spell was coming to an end, and I was soaking in the opportunity to sit back for once. A sharp 3 knocks straightened my back. My head swung round as I searched for the source. I was about to walk down the hall and check on the patients when the rapping sounded again from the supply closet. Cassie, did you lock yourself in there? I laughed as I swung open the door. It was empty. I told you to keep the door open. I whipped around to see Cassie behind me, but it's just the AC kicking on. That was not the AC. She walked round me and pushed the door to where it was cracked. This building is over 60 years old. It makes weird sounds. She walked away, and I stared after her as she made rounds, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth is what you make it. Taylor's voice held a tinge of sadness to it as she joined me the next night. I was on inpatient duty in the 200 hall. I brought the patients their dinner, fresh blankets, and nightly medications. It was easy to form idle chat with them as I took their vitals and settled them in for the night. Even those in pain were happy just to have some company as the lonely. Fall of night swept over the facility. Once everyone was good, I kicked back at the nurse's station. I eyed the cracked supply closet and tried to keep my heart rate from skyrocketing like it did every time I saw that slit of darkness. My skin crawled at the thought of something lurking in the void. The call light for room 213 came on and pulled me out of my own head. I frowned. Nobody was in that room tonight. Hey Cass, I thought room 213 was empty. It is, she shrugged. Probably a glitch. It happens sometimes. Just turn it off. I rubbed the goosebumps on my arms, but I wasn't about to admit I was afraid of a faulty core light. The hall seemed to close in on me with each step, and suddenly the void of the supply closet didn't seem so intimidating. Asterisk, asterisk, hello. My voice quivered as I peered around the door into the dark room. A figure loomed in the corner. It reached for me, warping the darkness around in it, a murky swirl of shadows. My mouth opened and a scream caught in my throat as I slammed the light. switch and pedaled backwards, falling over my own feet. I hit the ground and scrambled until my back hit the wall with the image of the figure stalking towards me burned into my retinas. Talia. Taylor crouched down with me while Cassie and Kate ran into the room. Just breathe, you're okay, Taylor murmured. We both looked up as Cassie came out of the room pushing an EKG cart. It's just the broken cart. Tal sure gave you a spook. Cassie wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Kate frowned. I thought they shipped this thing. Off to get the screen fixed. What's it doing here? I don't know, day shift can take it to the loading dock in the morning, Taylor said. You could take it, Cassie muttered. We don't go to the loading dock at night, Taylor snapped. Come on, Talia. I think you could use a break. It took me a long time to stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, the dark blotches behind my eyelids twisted into that cloaked figure. It hadn't been the EKG cart, but what else could it have been? I was making my own ghosts. If there was anything being a traveler had taught me, it was that there wasn't a soul around better at ruining their own fortune than myself. Nobody said much for the next few shifts until the weird tension finally broke. I stuck to the ER cases for a while until I felt up to impatience again. It was all in my head, I told myself. We had a new admit who was Native American. She had a beautiful handmade blanket that she laid across her lap in her room. She was a lovely patient, and I found myself lingering in her room as she told me stories from her childhood on the reservation. She was desperate to return home. Her eyes held a faraway light, and I wondered what it was like to feel that connected to place, to feel like there was somewhere you inexplicably belonged. She grew colder over her stay and stopped telling stories. It dampened my mood, but I brushed it off. Hospital stays were draining, and I couldn't fault her for that. I didn't think much more of it until Kim pulled me into her office one morning as I was leaving. Look, Talia, I know you aren't from around here, so you may not be aware of some parts of cultural care for our Native American population, but you need to be more respectful. What did I do? I'm sorry. I swear it wasn't on purpose. Her mouth formed a tight line. I'm sure you didn't know, but you can't whistle at night. It's believed that it invites negative energy. Oh, okay. I can't whistle though. I'm reminding all the girls, but I did pull the security footage to see who was doing it. She tapped at her computer, muttering an annoyance at the device as she went along. Ah, here. She turned the screen towards me with a squeak and clicked play on the clip. It was a fuzzy rendering of the 200 Hall, so washed out that it almost seemed in grayscale. Sure enough, I was walking along with a handful of blankets in my arms. The camera was at my back, so you couldn't see my face. But the unmistakable sound of whistling sounded from my figure. We all have our little fidgets. Please just be more aware and do not whistle at work. I hastily agreed and rushed out of the office, tears burning behind my eyes. Never had I whistled, but it was right there on the camera, as clear as day. What was wrong with me? The girls must have sensed I was off the next shift. They kept trying to cheer me up, but I found myself drifting further into my own listlessness. Kate snapped me out of it when she hopped up on a rolling chair to pop the clock off the wall, like she did every night. I instinctively reached out and steadied the chair. Is this OSHA approved? I joked. She laughed. Don't report me. Why are you always messing with that thing, anyway? Cassie leaned over the counter. She's OCD. Gotta have the timeline up exactly. Kate rolled her eyes. Shut up. This stupid thing gets stuck every night, and I'm tired of the day shifters whining about it. I wish they would just replace it, but this place is so cheap. Have you tried new batteries? Girl, I've gone through a whole box. It's just a cheap clock. I eyed it with suspicion. It was about as basic as a clock could be. White background, blocky black letters, and a cracked faux wood border that almost seemed to warp the plastic cover. The hands quivered as she rotated it, stuck on 333. Everything around here is crappy. Cassie moaned as she tapped the security monitor screen. Floating orbs drifted across the CCTV feed overlooking the loading dock. Freaking cameras pick up every dust mote in the county. A chill snaked up my spine as the orbs faded away, only to reappear on another feed across the hospital. My mouth went dry, and I found myself transfixed as I watched them drift in a hypnotic dance across the screens. Bet Rosa could clean off the dust, Taylor mused. Ugh, no. Don't make Rosa climb up there. That other janitor dude could do it if he wasn't such a douche. I'll tell Jason in the morning, Kate retorted. Oh, first name basis with the maintenance guy now. Scandalous, Cassie chirped. Shut up. Everyone is on a first name basis here. MAM, sure. Sounds like an excuse to me. Their light-hearted bickering couldn't pull me away as my eyes stayed trained on the screens. It was as though I were underwater, their voices distorted and far away as my heartbeat pounded in my ears. One by one, the orbs died away. None of them seemed to care as they drifted off to check on the patients. I stood up fast, balling my fists so tight that I felt the bite of my fingernails in my palms. The janitor kept sweeping on the back hole. Monitor, he never faltered away from his hyper-focus on whatever task he was working on. But as though he could feel the rake of my gaze, he looked up as though staring back at me. The grain of the feed made his eyes look like a pair of dark vacuums. The arrival of an ambulance pulled me away. I pushed myself further into my work rather than dwell on those camera feeds, vowing that one of the others could glance at them. From now on, my imagination was too prone to running wild. My next shifts were uneventful to the point that I was ready to full-heartedly accept that I was crazy. After all, the others made it all seem so trivial. I wished I could relax like them and stop feeling like a guest in my own skin. An inpatient in room 103 took a liking to me. She was a kind lady, always showing me pictures of her grandkids. It was nice to have the time to connect with a patient like that. She stopped me one night as I was saying my goodbyes. Could you please have them do something about the scratching on the window? It wakes me up at night. I walked over to the pane. Light reflected back from the hallway, obscuring the outside world. The corners were stained with mildew, but sure enough, long-fingered branches scraped at the edge. It grated at my ears and set my teeth on edge. I'll put in a maintenance ticket, I assured her. Thanks, love. You're an angel. I smiled and made my way back to the nurse's station. Hey Kate, can you hit up Jason to trim the branches outside 103's room? Sure thing. She spun around in her chair. Oh, can you take some water to 208? Please, of course. I made my way down the hallway that seemed darker than usual. One of the light bulbs was out, so I went to the end and turned on the lights in the therapy room before doubling back to 208. I was about to ask Kate to add the light bulb to the maintenance request when a flicker at the corner of my eye had spinning. Back around, the therapy room flashed in a series of short flickers, followed by long flares and another set of short flickers. It stabilized for so long that I thought my eyes must have been playing tricks on me before it happened again. Who turned on the therapy room lights? Taylor snapped. The light bulb was out, and it was dark. Turn them off. Her voice was a snarl. Geez, Taylor, give her a break. It's not her fault, the wiring sucks. Cassie came around the corner. Look, I'll get it. What? Afraid you're going to be the next one to have a seizure? Kate barked. It could happen to anyone with those lights flashing in the dark. Like that, that's happened. I managed to squeak out. They spoke at the same time. Don't worry about it. I am sorry, I tried again. Asterisk, she sighed. It's fine, I shouldn't have snapped. I'm a little sensitive to it, is all, Taylor admitted. I was good friends with the last traveler. Morning couldn't come fast enough. Each passing shift had me craving the light of day more than the last. I found it more and more difficult to sleep, and fell into an old pattern of sleeping pills that I had sworn I wouldn't resort to again. I was caught up in my own tangled thoughts when Kate called out to me during my next shift. Hey, you. Gave me the wrong room number. What? I asked, confused. The branches. They were outside room 205, not 203. Kate raised her eyebrows. No, I distinctly remember seeing them in room 203 with Mrs. Cooper. Kate shrugged. You were probably just tired. Have you tried blackout curtains? Cassie butted in. Yes, my voice came out sharper than I intended, and she raised up her palms in defense. Whoa, don't shoot the messenger. Just trying to help a girl out. Yay, sorry, CK. Hey, you want to help me roll this EKG card to the loading dock? Is that the one with the broken screen? Yay, people keep leaving it in random rooms, and I'm tired of it. Didn't Taylor say we aren't supposed to go back there at night? She rolled her eyes. Don't be superstitious, it's fine. I chewed on my lip, but followed her anyway. She chatted about the prank she had pulled on Jason and Katel while she was watching him clean mold out of the ceiling. Nothing seemed to bother her. Each step set my nerves on fire, and I felt like I was walking the gallows while she was throwing. Back her head with laughter. I swallowed repeatedly, my ears popping and the hair rising on the back of my neck as the temperature dipped low enough to pepper my skin with goosebumps. Man, it's cold back here. These old buildings are the worst. Here, let's just stick it by the maintenance door and maybe they'll actually box it up this time. A wave of thick cologne sent me coughing. Cassie wrinkled her nose. Ugh, gross. We both looked down. The hall where the janitor was sweeping down the hall. Hey buddy, cool it with the perfume, will ya, Cassie? I hissed. She snorted. What? Someone's gotta tell him. Let's just get out of here. Tension wrought my shoulders as I felt eyes watching us leave. They left lingering swathes down my back and followed me long after we left the loading dock. I became jumpier than ever and found myself misplacing everything I touched. It was the point that the others wouldn't even wait for me to ask anymore. They would just hand me a pen when I went to write something, knowing mine was gone. This assignment was dragging out too long. The money wasn't enough to justify it anymore. I was snapped out of my funk one morning by Kim calling us all into her office. Girls, I know you know the rules, and I know that in reality you are going to be on your phones sometimes, but you need to be discreet about it. If you keep blatantly disregarding the rules like this, I'm going to have to enforce the ban. What are you even talking about? We've been swamped. Nobody has been on their phones in weeks. Cassie bristled. I've gotten multiple complaints from patients about kids laughing outside their rooms. I know it's those little videos you all watch on your phones. And where exactly is your proof? I don't need proof when I have 7 patient complaints in 2 weeks. How do you know it's not just one of their TVs? It's spread across both halls and multiple patients. So, you think, Cassie. Kate stopped her. Look, we are sorry. It won't happen again. We left the hospital and Cassie whirled Kate around as soon as we were out of sight of the lobby. What did you do that for? You know it wasn't us. Because it isn't worth it, Cass. Just let it go. She huffed and stomped off. You think it was a TV? Taylor pursed her lips. I don't know or care. Patients will complain about everything, but we do play on our phones when it's slow, and I don't want to risk him taking them away by arguing. At least this time, I didn't have to fight back tears. I was too drained to find the energy. Cut my contract. I dared them with my thoughts. What I wouldn't give to be out of that town as it cracked around me, bringing into hyper-focus every pothole and broken streetlight, every boarded-up building and abandoned piece of furniture. Sometimes I drove into the city and stared at the glittering glass windows and neon signs just to purge this place from my mind, if only for a moment. And yet, another night came. I stared at my pen on the floor when I swore it had just been on the desk and sighed. If I left it, it would probably disappear just like all the others. A call light flashed for room 103, and I slid my chair back slowly. My hatred for that room was only beat out by 213. What can I help you with? I asked a lady who had bundled herself under a pile of blankets, so thick that only a pair of watery eyes peered out. Make him stop touching my face. I just want to go to sleep. Who is touching your face? The man in the hat. He keeps coming in here and touching my face. I'm tired of it, okay? I'll see what I can do. She harumphed and buried herself deeper into her blanket nest. Hey Taylor, has 103 had any visitors? No, the doctor hasn't even made rounds for a while. She said a man in a hat keeps touching her face. Taylor paled but recovered quickly. She's in early stage dementia. I'll mention it to the doc in morning rounds. You know what they say about Hatman, Cassie sang. Not this again, Kate groaned, sliding down into the chair at the station. She's gonna croak. 72 hours, bet. Cass, don't talk like that about patients. She rolled her eyes. Literally everyone does. Yay, well, Kim is already on our asses, so at least do it when we aren't sitting under cameras. Fine, but you all should make your bets. I looked up at the camera and wondered if orbs floated around us like they did on the feeds. An involuntary shiver crawled up my spine at the thought, and I dared to peek at the screens. Nothing out. Of the ordinary, just the janitor sweeping away. It was a wonder there was any dust to moat with him around. The very next night, a bang sent me rocking to my feet, when the grief room door swung open so hard that it ricocheted off the wall. Shit. All three of them said at once and rushed to room 103. In slow motion. I followed as though I were wading through a waking dream. The patient lay prone on her bed with lifeless eyes pointed at the window. For a fraction of a second, I saw the figure of a man in a hat raking fingers across the warped glass, but it was gone with the next blink. I rubbed my eyes hard enough, 4 bright spots to explode behind my eyelids. Talia, startled, I croaked out a simple response. What? Get the doc. Dead as a doornail, he pronounced dramatically. All I could think about was that hat man and the way that door had flung open. This was more than me being tired and letting shadows dance in my imagination. I approached Taylor late in the night after the coroner had wheeled the body away. That door opened on its own, I told her. This building is drafty. It happens sometimes. You all knew to go check on 103, I argued. She's a complainer. Wanted to make sure she didn't get woken up. Cassie knew she was going to die. It's just a coincidence. Just tell me what is happening here, I shouted, shocking myself. I never raised my voice. Taylor's eyes grew wide at my outburst. I told you, Talia. Her voice was barely a whisper. The truth is what you make it. Be careful what you choose. Days and nights passed in such a blur that I could no longer define the edges. Only the occasional moment would flare out of the patterned obsolescence. Footsteps in an empty hall. A shadow falling from a still room. Another dissipated pen. A whisper over my shoulder. The press of a cold spot in a warm hallway. I wanted to be frightened, but it was becoming all too easy to dismiss it like everyone else did. Perhaps I would be just like everyone else in that hospital, donning the rose-colored glasses. Ready to die rather than take them off for even a moment. Kim stopped us again. I steeled myself for her to cut me for my poor performance. Rosa has the flu. We don't have anyone who can cover her shift. So you all will have to take over some of the janitor duties, mostly turning over rooms. Why can't the guy, janitor, do it? Kim's face scrunched. There is only one night janitor. No, there isn't, Taylor added. We see the other guy all the time. He's just a bit of a jerk. I've seen him too. He's usually sweeping. She picked up her walkie. Charlie, can you come to my office really quick? Copy, the maintenance manager replied. He strode in. Yepsum. They are saying there's a male night janitor. Nah, don't have any males. On staff right now. We see him all the time. Cassie's voice grew frantic. Pull the footage. He hangs in the back hall. Kim and Charlie shared a look, but relented, pulling the footage. We crowded behind them as they sped through tape after tape. Asterisk, asterisk there. Was nothing there. Well, the footage skips, right? The cameras are old. I'll tell you girls what. You see him again. Give me a call and I'll come up. It was probably just Rosa. It wasn't Rosa. Taylor's voice was strained. Forget it. Cassie threw her arms up. Expect a call. She glared back as she stalked out of the room. If you truly feel someone is in the building who shouldn't be, please call the police and have them clear the building. They are just up the road and won't mind. We nodded, the animosity palpable in the air. The next shift we worked together had all of us on edge. It was refreshing to not be the only one bothered. Buzzing ran down my veins from the mixture of caffeine and sleeping pills that were keeping me alive, but my mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. I had rolled down my windows on the drive and sucked that cold air deep into my lungs over the bridge, letting it wash me clean. I've never actually seen him, Kate mused, as we watched the monitors for a sign of the janitor. Is he cute, Kate? Taylor chided. Is that all you ever think about? Isn't Jason enough? She shrugged. Can't a girl look? He's old. He could probably be your dad. Taylor rolled her eyes. Kate wagged her eyebrows. Maybe I like M older. Taylor scowled with a disgusted look, but was interrupted before she could say more. There he is, Cassie hollered, jumping out of her chair so fast that it tipped over and clattered against the peeling linoleum. I knew it. Cass, where are you going? Kate called. I'm gonna go confront that arsehole. Who's coming? They told us to call the police if we saw him again. Taylor argued. Oh, like that grumpy bastard is going to do anything. He's been hanging around here for years. You call them while I go tell him what's up. Kate snatched up a walkie. I'll go with her. Of course you will, Taylor muttered under her breath while she made phone calls. My eyes stayed trained on the feed. It almost seemed to crackle under my scrutiny. Never once did his sweeping falter, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The same spot, over and over and over again. "Hey Taylor, isn't it odd?" Cassie and Kate came into view. Their heads swung around and Cassie threw up her arms and looked at the feed. Still, the man kept sweeping, as though there weren't. Two girls right in front of him. Kate put the walkie up to her mouth. "Where'd he go?" My voice quivered as I answered, "He's behind you." They swung round, searching in confusion before turning back to the camera. "Nobody's there, Tal. He's right there." My voice rose an octave as panic clawed at my throat. Taylor joined me, staring for a second before picking up the walkie. "What are you all doing?" "He's right there." Cassie narrowed her eyes at the camera and waved her arms in front of it. "We don't see anyone," Kate said, so slowly that it almost seemed as if he weren't moving at all. The sweeping ceased, and he turned to the camera, looking straight into it. A shot of ice pierced my heart as the shadows walked around his face until he was glowering at us. "Get out of there," Taylor's whispered into the walkie. Cassie and Kate bolted. We looked up when they came running around the corner, and when we turned back to the feed, he was gone. "What was that?" Kate started to cry, and Cassie's face was so pale I grew worried she might faint. "You really didn't see him?" Taylor asked, as she guided Cassie to a chair. "Nobody was there," she cried, but it got really cold, like somebody left the door open. The police and Charlie showed up shortly after. Everybody who had keyed into the building was accounted for when they checked the system. Pulling the feeds was useless. By the time Cassie and Kate showed up on screen, the video was skipping and wavering so much that it was hard to even discern them. It wasn't like that. Taylor cried. The feed was clear. We saw him. We all saw him. Probably just a trick of the light, or an old image superimposed. We will sweep the building again. But it looks like you girls have nothing to worry about, other than an overactive imagination. We gaped at him, but there wasn't anything we could do. They didn't believe us. We were dismissed just as easily as everything else around there was. If anything, it would have been more surprising if they had admitted something was wrong. The truth is what you make it, I thought idly. Winter fell around us. He never showed up on the feeds again. It was just another anomaly that I doubted had ever really existed. One night, I stared at the floor of the empty trauma bay. Strange shadows seemed to scuff the floor under the bed. I snagged one of the purple wipes and tried to wipe it away, but it didn't budge, even when my fingers turned red and started to burn from scrubbing. "It won't go away," Taylor said behind me as she came in to restock the cabinets. "What is it? I don't remember this being here before." She looked me in the eye, her voice void of all emotion. Blood doesn't do that." She slammed the cabinet shut. "The floors are old. They need replaced." I watched over the next few shifts, and even so much as a drop of blood on the floor left a small shadow behind. How had I never noticed before? Subtly, I started lying down towels or positioning any potential blood spill over rubber mats. Something about the little shadows opened a pit in my stomach. We were slower than we had been since I had started there. A handful of patients were in the 100 hall, and the ER visits tapered off until the night was dead. The patients had been fast asleep for hours, and we milled about the nurses' station, buried in our phones. After the incident with the janitor, our conversations had died to near zero. It surprised me when Cassie smacked my arm and pointed to the monitors. Each of the feeds slowly dimmed until they were too dark, too much more than vague shadows. Taylor grabbed the mouse and circled it around, trying to wake it up to no avail. The phone rang and we all jumped. Cassie picked up and dropped it once before nesting it into her shoulder and offering a greeting. "Hello." Her face wrinkled. In confusion, "Hello-y, I can't hear you. Who is it?" Kate asked. She shrugged. "I just hear whispers." "Let me hear." She pressed it to her ear and frowned before passing it around to each of us. I listened close, only hearing a whisper, too soft to discern anything more than that it was a voice. At first I thought it was female, but then the tone would shift, and I wasn't sure anymore. It reminded me of the quiet prayers they had played daily over the intercom systems in a Catholic hospital I had worked at once. Cold sweat started to break the longer I listened, and my throat went dry. I slammed the phone down and looked at the others. Maybe it was bad service. They'll call back later if it's important. Footsteps sounded down the 100 hall. We all stood up, but nobody was there. Cassie opened her mouth as though she were about to say something when the lights flickered out in a procession down both hallways before stuttering back on. We huddled together behind the nurse's station. Taylor's voice wavered. "It's windy. It messes with the power grid." As if on cue, the wind outside whipped up into an eerie howl. The ceiling tiles seemed to shake, and a thin powder of dust rained down, making the air thick around us. The phone started to ring again, and Kate picked it up quickly before slamming it back down. Again, it rang. Again, she hung up. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the building until its howl was shaking the window panes. "Help! Help me! Someone, please!" A voice screamed down the hall. Pressing our fears aside, we ran to the patient rooms, each of us taking one. I stopped in front of room 203. The patient was fast asleep. As I looked to the others, they nodded their heads to affirm that everyone was where they were supposed to be. "Help. Please, God, help me." That's coming from down the 200 hall. There aren't any patients in that hall tonight. An ER patient. The last one left hours ago. Silence impregnated the air as we collectively held our breath. Why? The voice wailed, "Please, please don't. Help me." Maybe it's the lab girl. Kate's voice was a whimper. Taylor snatched the walkie, lab copy. Seconds that felt like hours passed before we got a response. "Copy. Are you okay?" "Yay. Just chilling." "What's up? Where's Julie?" "Is she in the radiology room?" "She's sleeping in the lounge." "You'll need imaging." "I can get her." "Someone's yelling for help down the 200 hall." "Okay." "Probably just a patient," she said before dropping off. "Leave me alone." Pain saturated the voice so thick that my teeth ached. We huddled closer as our arms clutched each other. The lights started going out one by one until only the one above our station was left. The eerie glow of exit signs were the only splashes of color down the halls right as another gust of wind picked up. It sounded as though the roof were peeling off. "God, please help me." The voice devolved into a garbled whimper. "I think it's the CT room," Taylor said. Tears streaking down her face, Kim snatched a phone off the counter and dialed 911, keeping her voice low and steady despite the panic in her eyes. Down the 200 hall, I watched the CT room door that was firmly shut. Nobody went in there at night. It was a heavy door, anyway, difficult to open. The shadows walked, sticking to the darkest corners and swelling with each scream of the wind. I narrowed my eyes as sickeningly familiar figures seemed to manifest in the darkness before breaking away into nothing. "We have to go check," Cassie said with more bravado than I thought possible. "Someone needs help. We can't just stand." "There, asterisk, asterisk, what?" and find them just like you found that janitor. Taylor hissed. She's right, I added. I don't think it's safe. Please, help me, the voice sobbed. That's it, I'm going. Cassie pulled away and I grabbed her arm, the others following in suit. Let me go, she thrashed. The police will be here any minute. Just wait. Kate begged, as if on cue. The lights all flashed back on, and the wind died right as the grief room door slammed open, swinging back and forth with a terrible squeak from the momentum. A banging from the front door caught our attention, and before any of us managed to get up, the police breached with guns drawn. They filed down the hall and gave the door 3 hard kicks before it finally gave way, afraid to so much as breath. We waited an eternity before one of the cops came running out, pale and clammy. We need medical assistance. Kate paged the doctor while the rest of us took off, running down the hall. Nothing could have prepared me for that room. The patient from room 203 was sprawled across the ground. Her eyes were milky and wide. An expression of pure horror stretched her face into a grotesque scream that was frozen in death. Bones jutted from her ankle, her foot hanging on with stringy tendons. It was cracked at a 90-degree angle with mangled flesh gaping through the break. Blood formed a haloed pool around her as it saturated her thin white hair, matting it down in clumps. We were escorted away from the scene and wrapped in blankets outside. I stared off into the trees that seemed sinister in the glow of the swirling red and blue lights. Everything happened as though we were in slow motion. Voices were garbled and distorted as they asked question after question. They had to repeat them 3 times before I was able to comprehend, let alone form a response. Eventually, we were cleared to leave. Her body was wrapped up in a bag and hauled away. The managers reviewed footage and found nothing to condemn. Our actions and the administration was quick to sweep everything under the rug. They labeled it a freak accident. I knew the drill and didn't bother to wait for them to cut my contract short. I simply left and waited for my recruiter to call. You're starting to get a reputation, Talia. It's getting harder to find contracts for you. What do you have this time? There was a sigh from the other end and a shuffling of papers. I'll email you the info. Can you just do me a favor this time? No more mysterious deaths on shift, please. I was tired of it too. It wasn't fair that I couldn't ignore the shadows like everyone else. Every time I turned my hands over, the blotches blooming my skin seemed to darken like the stains that would forever mark the floor of the CT room. No matter how many times I scrubbed them, they continued to mock me. Even chemical peels and shaving off a layer of skin with a knife hadn't touched them. I'll take it, I told her before hanging up. The road ahead was my only comfort. As I drove on into the endless charade of my life, always the traveler,